In July 1976, a man named Tommy Reeves died, saving three children from a burning apartment building in Oakland, California. What happened in the minutes before Tommy's death and what Clint Eastwood did quietly for the next 18 years became one of those stories that almost no one knew about until the children were grown, and one of them decided the world needed to hear it. Tommy Reeves and Clint Eastwood had been friends since they were 7 years old, growing up in the same working class Oakland neighborhood in the 1930s. They'd met in second grade, became inseparable through elementary school, stayed close through high school despite going to different schools. They were different kids. Clint was quiet, observant, kept to himself mostly. Tommy was outgoing, loud, the kid who made friends with everyone. But something about their differences worked. Tommy pulled Clint out of his shell. Clint gave Tommy someone who actually listened instead of just waiting to talk. They stayed friends into adulthood, though their lives went different directions. Clint went into the Army, then to Hollywood, then became a star. Tommy stayed in Oakland, worked construction, got married, had no kids of his own, but was the kind of guy who treated every kid in the neighborhood like family. They'd see each other when Clint came back to Oakland to visit family. Not often Clint's career kept him busy, but often enough that the friendship stayed real. They'd grab beers, talk about old times, catch up on life. In 1976, Clint was at the peak of his career. The Outlaw, Josie Wales, had just come out. He was directing and starring in films, one of the biggest names in Hollywood. Tommy was still doing construction, living in the same Oakland neighborhood they'd grown up in, now in his mid-40s. On the 18th of July, 1976, a fire started in a three-story apartment building on Tommy's block. Electrical fault, investigators later determined. It started around 11 p.m. on the second floor and spread fast. Tommy was walking home from a friend's house when he saw the smoke. He ran toward the building. Other neighbors were already gathering, calling for fire trucks, accounting for residents. Someone shouted that there were kids still inside. Third floor, apartment 3C. The Martinez family parents had gone out for the evening, left their three kids with a teenage babysitter who'd managed to get out but was screaming that the children were still up there. Three kids: Maria, age 8, Carlos, age 6, little Rosa, age 3. The fire department was on the way but hadn't arrived yet. The second floor was engulfed. The stairs were impassable. The third floor was filling with smoke. Tommy didn't hesitate. He ran into the building. Witnesses later said he went up the external fire escape, broke a third-floor window, and climbed inside. The apartment was filling with smoke. He found the three children huddled in a back bedroom, terrified, coughing. He got Rosa, the youngest, in his arms. He told Maria and Carlos to hold onto his jacket. He got them to the window. By now, neighbors had positioned themselves below. Tommy dropped Rosa out the window to waiting arms, then Carlos, then Maria. All three kids made it out. Tommy was climbing out the window himself when part of the second floor collapsed, destabilizing the structure. The sound was like thunder beams, cracking walls giving way. The third floor buckled underneath him. Tommy fell backwards into the apartment just as the floor gave way beneath his feet. Witnesses said they heard him hit the ground floor through 2 levels of collapsed structure. The building's facade was still standing, but the interior had pancaked. Tommy was buried under rubble and fire. He died in the collapse. The fire department arrived 3 minutes later, 3 minutes that felt like hours to the neighbors watching helplessly. By the time firefighters could safely enter what remained of the building, Tommy was gone. They found his body protecting the spot where the children had been, as if even in death he was still trying to shield them. 3 children saved, 1 man dead. The Martinez parents returned home to find their apartment building destroyed, their children alive, and Tommy Reeves gone. Clint was in Montana filming when he got the call. He flew to Oakland immediately for the funeral. The service was packed. Tommy had been one of those people everyone knew and liked. The Martinez family sat in the front row with their 3 children, still processing what had happened. At the funeral, Clint sat in the back. He didn't want attention. This wasn't about him. This was about Tommy. But sitting there listening to people talk about his oldest friend, Clint felt something shift inside him. Tommy had died at 46. Clint was 46. They'd lived parallel lives for 4 decades. Clint had become famous, wealthy, successful. Tommy had stayed working class, unknown, ordinary. And yet Tommy's final act, running into a burning building to save 3 children, was worth more than anything Clint had ever done on screen. Clint watched the Martinez family, Rafael and Carmen, barely holding it together, 3 young children who didn't fully understand yet that the man who'd saved them was gone forever. Little Rosa kept asking when Tommy was coming back. Maria was crying quietly. Carlos sat stone-faced in shock, and Clint thought, Tommy gave them their lives. Someone needs to make sure those lives are worth the sacrifice. After the service, Clint approached Rafael and Carmen Martinez privately. I'm Clint Eastwood, he said quietly. Tommy was my oldest friend. They knew who he was, everyone did, but they were surprised he was there. I want to help, Clint said, with the kids, with whatever you need. Rafael Martinez was a warehouse worker. Carmen cleaned houses. They'd lost everything in the fire, their apartment, their possessions, everything. Insurance would cover some of it, but they were facing financial devastation on top of grief. We don't need charity, Rafael said, pride making him defensive. It's not charity. Tommy saved your children. That means something. Let me help. They talked for 20 minutes. Clint made an offer that Rafael and Carmen initially refused, then reluctantly accepted because they didn't have better options. Clint would set up a trust fund for the 3 children. Education expenses, medical costs, emergency needs. He'd fund it anonymously through a lawyer. The Martinez family would never have to worry about being able to afford what the kids needed. But there were conditions. The arrangement stayed private, no press, no publicity. No one could know the money came from Clint Eastwood. If word got out, the fund would end. Clint didn't want credit. He didn't want headlines about Hollywood star helps kids. He wanted Tommy's children because that's how he thought of them, Tommy's kids, the ones Tommy had died saving, to have the opportunities they deserved. Rafael and Carmen agreed. The trust was established within a week. Anonymous benefactor, managed by a law firm in San Francisco. The Martinez family never knew the details of how much was in it. They just knew that when Maria needed braces, the trust covered it. When Carlos needed glasses, covered. When Rosa had to go to the emergency room, covered. But Clint didn't just write checks and disappear. Every few months, he'd call the Martinez home, never announced who he was to the kids, just a friend of your parents. He'd ask how they were doing in school, what they were interested in, what they wanted to be when they grew up. Once or twice a year, when he was in the Bay Area, he'd arrange to meet Rafael for coffee. They'd talk about the kids. Clint would ask what they needed, what challenges they were facing. When Maria struggled with math in 6th grade, Clint arranged for a tutor, paid through the trust, anonymously. When Carlos wanted to play Little League, but the family couldn't afford the equipment, the trust covered it. When Rosa's school had a field trip to Washington, D.C. in eighth grade that cost $800 per student, the trust paid for it. The kids never knew where the help came from. Their parents told them they had a trust fund from a friend of the man who saved you. That was all. As the children got older, the expenses got bigger. Maria wanted to go to college. She was smart, got good grades, had her heart set on UC Berkeley. The trust paid full tuition, room and board, books, everything. Carlos developed a passion for mechanics, wanted to go to trade school, become an automotive technician. The trust paid for a 2-year program at a top technical school. Rosa wanted to be a teacher. The trust paid for her education degree at San Francisco State. Clint watched from a distance, through Rafael, through occasional phone calls, through the trust administrator. He kept track of how the kids were doing. He never inserted himself into their lives directly, never showed up at graduations or birthdays, stayed invisible. In 1994, 18 years after Tommy's death, Maria graduated from UC Berkeley with a degree in social work. She was 26 years old. Carlos was 24, working as a certified mechanic. Rosa was 21, finishing her teaching credential. Rafael Martinez called Clint. The kids want to know who's been helping them all these years. They're adults now. They deserve to know. Clint had always known this moment would come. He'd agreed to help raise these children financially from a distance, but he'd always planned to stay anonymous. Tell them the truth, Clint said finally, but tell them privately. No press. A week later, Rafael sat his 3 children down and told them the full story. Tommy Reeves had saved their lives in 1976. He'd been childhood friends with a man who became a famous actor. That actor was Clint Eastwood, and Clint had been quietly paying for their education, their medical care, everything they needed for 18 years, because he believed that's what Tommy would have wanted. The reaction from the kids was complicated. Shock, gratitude, confusion about why someone they'd never met would do this. Guilt that they'd benefited so much from a stranger's generosity. Maria was the first to ask, "Can we meet him to say thank you?" Clint agreed to one meeting, private. No cameras, no publicity. They met at a quiet restaurant in Oakland. Clint arrived early, waited at a corner table. When the Martinez family walked in, Rafael, Carmen, and 3 grown children, Clint stood. The first thing Maria said was, "We don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," Clint said. "Tommy saved your lives. I just made sure you could do something with those lives he gave you." They talked for 2 hours. Clint told stories about Tommy from when they were kids. The time Tommy convinced him to skip school and they got caught. The time they built a treehouse that collapsed. The way Tommy could make anyone laugh. "He was the best person I ever knew," Clint said quietly. "He died the way he lived, thinking of other people first." Carlos asked the question they'd all been wondering. "Why did you stay hidden? You could have gotten credit for helping us." Clint's answer was simple. "Because it wasn't about me. It was about Tommy. And it was about making sure you 3 had what you needed without the pressure of knowing some famous person was watching. I wanted you to just be kids, then just be teenagers, then just be adults, not the kids Clint Eastwood is helping." Before they left, Rosa, the youngest, who'd been 3 when Tommy saved her, said something that made Clint's eyes well up. "I don't remember the fire. I don't remember Tommy. But I remember my parents never being stressed about money when my friends' parents were. I remember always being able to do things other kids couldn't afford. I remember feeling lucky. I know now that was you. So thank you for my whole childhood. Clint just nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The Martinez family kept their word. The story stayed private. They told close friends, but nothing ever went to the press. Clint continued to check in occasionally. When Maria got married in 1997, Clint sent a wedding gift through Rafael, nothing extravagant, just a simple note. Tommy would be proud of the woman you've become. When Carlos opened his own auto repair shop in 2001, Clint was one of the first customers, brought in his truck, paid full price, told Carlos he was doing good work. When Rosa got her first teaching job in 2002, Clint sent flowers to her classroom with a card. The best way to honor someone who saved your life is to help save others. You're doing that every day. The story only became public in 2019, 43 years after Tommy's death, when Maria Martinez, by then Maria Chen, a 1-year-old social worker, was interviewed for a local Oakland newspaper article about childhood trauma survivors. She mentioned in passing that she'd been saved from a fire as a child by a man who died in the rescue. The reporter asked for details. Maria told the story, and she told what happened after. Clint Eastwood raised us, she said simply. Not in person, but he made sure we were raised right. He paid for everything we needed for 18 years, and he never asked for credit. That's the kind of man he is. But more importantly, that's the kind of man Tommy Reeves was, because Clint did it to honor his friend. The article went viral within hours. Major outlets picked it up by evening. By the next morning, it was national news. Clint Eastwood's 18-year secret raised heroes' children in silence. The story had everything journalists loved: celebrity, generosity, hidden good deeds, a tragic backstory. Journalists started calling Clint's representatives for comment. News crews showed up at Maria's workplace, at Carlos's auto shop, at Rosa's school. The Martinez family found themselves suddenly thrust into a spotlight they'd never wanted. Clint's response, through his publicist, was brief. Tommy Reeves was a hero who saved 3 lives. I helped his kids because that's what friends do. There's nothing more to say. But there was more to say. Maria, Carlos, and Rosa, all grown with children of their own, now gave a joint interview explaining what Clint's quiet generosity had meant. We didn't grow up wondering if we'd be able to afford college, Carlos said. We didn't grow up with medical debt when one of us got sick. We didn't grow up feeling like burdens to our parents. That freedom, that security, that came from Clint Eastwood. For 18 years, he was invisible, but he was there. Today, all 3 of the children Tommy saved are still alive and thriving. Maria works with trauma survivors. Carlos runs a successful auto shop that trains disadvantaged youth. Rosa teaches 4th grade in Oakland and volunteers with literacy programs. And every July 18th, the anniversary of the fire, they visit Tommy Reeves' grave together. Sometimes Clint joins them. Most years he doesn't. But they know he remembers. Here's what Tommy's death and Clint's quiet response teaches us. Some acts of heroism are loud and public. Tommy running into a burning building was loud and public and cost him everything. Some acts of heroism are quiet and private. Clint, spending 18 years making sure Tommy's sacrifice resulted in 3 lives well lived, was quiet and private and cost him nothing but money. Both mattered. Both were necessary. Tommy saved 3 lives in one night. Clint spent 18 years making sure those saved lives became lives worth living. That's what friendship means. Not just mourning the person you lost, but honoring them by protecting what they died, protecting. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that the truest generosity happens in private, and the greatest tribute to a fallen friend is making sure their sacrifice wasn't wasted.